The night air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked pavement and the distant hum of a restless city. I kept my head low, my breath controlled, each step measured. The streets blurred around me, neon reflections dancing in the puddles like ghosts of the past. Samantha's face lingered in my mind, soft yet determined, eyes filled with something between love and regret. She wanted me to run. She needed me to disappear. And so I did, but running never meant escaping. Not really. The moment I slipped into the shadows, something inside me twisted, curled into itself like a dying ember. Love wasn't meant for men like me. It was a cruel joke, a taste of something I'd never be allowed to keep. Samantha changed things. She made me feel human. That was the problem. Feeling was dangerous. Feeling made you weak, and weakness got you killed. I pressed my back against the cold brick of an alleyway, exhaling slow. My fingers absent-mindedly spun the old coin between them, a habit I'd picked up whenever the storm inside me got too loud. It wasn't just Samantha haunting me. It was her, Katherine Blake, the woman who had orchestrated this entire mess. The woman who made me choose between love and survival. She thought she had won. She thought she had played me like a fool, used Samantha like a pawn to get close. But I saw it now. I saw the game she played, and I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. I needed a plan. I needed patience. And most of all, I needed to make her suffer in a way that left her broken, just like she had broken me. I flicked the coin into the air, catching it with practiced ease. One last job before I vanished for good. Katherine Blake had no idea what was coming. I never imagined my heart could ache this much. The streets of Chicago felt colder than ever, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't running just for survival. I was running from something deeper. Samantha. Her name was an echo inside my skull, a ghost that clung to every step I took. I should have killed her. I should have left her behind, but I couldn't. I still see the way she looked at me in those last moments, that silent plea in her eyes. She wanted me to leave, to escape, and I did. But now, every breath felt like a mistake. I pressed the cigarette between my lips, my hands steady despite the chaos inside me. The city lights flickered, distant sirens wailing in the night. I was supposed to be focusing, planning, but my mind kept slipping back to her. The softness in her voice, the fire in her gaze. Enough! I exhaled sharply, tossing the cigarette to the ground and crushing it beneath my boot. This wasn't about her. Not anymore. Katherine Blake. The name alone sent a fresh wave of rage through me. She thought she had won. She thought she could manipulate, control, destroy me. But she was about to learn a painful lesson. No one puts a leash on the wandering shadow. I had been careful, covering my tracks, disappearing into the underground like a ghost. But now, I was ready to resurface. I had people in places she wouldn't expect, whispers of corruption, secrets buried beneath the badge she wore so proudly. Katherine Blake was more than just a relentless detective. She was a woman who had made enemies, and I was about to make sure those enemies found her. I pulled out a burner phone and dialed a number from memory. The voice on the other end was hesitant, cautious. "It's me." Silence. Then a sharp inhale. "Jesus Christ, Jack. Where the hell have you been?" "Busy. But now I need something." A pause. "You always do." I smirked. "Katherine Blake. I want everything on her. Every mistake. Every skeleton in her closet. You dig deep. You bring me the dirt." A chuckle. "You planning something big?" I let the silence answer for me. Finally, the voice spoke again. "All right, but this won't be easy. Nothing worth it ever is." I ended the call and stared out at the city below. Katherine had taken something from me. She had made me feel. And now, I was going to take everything from her, one move at a time. I sat in a dimly lit motel room, staring at the old coin between my fingers, spinning it over and over. The metallic sound echoed in the silence, a rhythmic reminder that I was still here, still breathing, still hunting. My mind was a battlefield. Samantha's voice lingered in the recesses of my thoughts, clashing with the cold, calculating whispers of vengeance. Katherine Blake. The name alone made my grip tighten, the coin pressing into my palm hard enough to leave an imprint. She thought she had won. She thought she had taken everything from me. But she had no idea what it meant to push someone like me to the edge. I had spent the past few weeks studying her every move. Katherine was predictable, just like the rest of them, self-righteous, arrogant, drunk on the power of the badge. But power was a fragile thing, and I was going to rip it from her hands piece by piece. Step 1. Isolation. I left a few well-placed breadcrumbs. An anonymous tip about a botched case, whispers in the right ears, rumors about her integrity. The Internal Affairs Division was already sniffing around. Step 2. Disgrace. The media was a beast, hungry for scandals. A little push in the right direction, a fabricated witness, an altered report, and suddenly, Katherine Blake wasn't the untouchable detective anymore. She was a liability. Step 3. Ruin. I watched from the shadows as the walls closed in on her. She fought back, of course. She always did. But the harder she struggled, the deeper she sank. It was poetic, really. Still, no matter how deep I buried myself in this game of destruction, Samantha's face haunted me. The warmth in her eyes before the betrayal. The way she had looked at me, not as a monster, but as a man she had loved, even if only for a fleeting moment. And now she was gone. I clenched my jaw, pushing the thought away. There was no room for regret, no space for sorrow, only the hunt. Katherine Blake had set fire to my world. Now I was going to burn hers to the ground. The city hummed with life outside my window, but in my world, there was only silence. The kind that wrapped around you, thick and suffocating. The kind that made you listen to the ghosts whispering in your ear. Tonight, those whispers belonged to Samantha. I sat in the darkness, the cigarette between my fingers burning down to the filter, its embers casting flickering shadows on the walls. My mind replayed the way she had looked at me, the fire in her eyes when she defied me, the softness when she let her guard down. She was different. She saw something in me that no one else did. But even she couldn't save me from myself. I had buried that part of me a long time ago, or at least I thought I had. A sharp knock on the door yanked me out of my thoughts. I didn't flinch. Fear had long since abandoned me. Moving to the peephole, I caught sight of a figure I had been expecting. A man in a cheap suit, nervous eyes shifting in every direction. My informant. I let him in without a word. He handed me an envelope, avoiding my gaze like a sinner before confession. Internal Affairs is closing in, he muttered. Blake's losing ground fast. The brass is starting to sweat. I smirked, flipping through the documents. Fabricated evidence, manufactured testimony. It was all playing out exactly as I had planned. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Push harder, I said, my voice calm but firm. I want her drowning. The man hesitated, rubbing his sweaty palms together. Look, I don't know what your deal is with her, but this is dangerous. If she figures out she's being set up. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us in an instant. She won't, I murmured, voice laced with something cold and final. Not until it's too late. The man swallowed hard and gave a stiff nod before hurrying out, leaving me alone with the weight of my revenge. I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. The pieces were falling into place, but the ache in my chest wouldn't subside. Samantha had stirred something in me I couldn't erase, and I hated her for it as much as I missed her. But emotions were distractions, and distractions got people killed. Katherine Blake had taken everything from me. I would return the favor, one agonizing piece at a time. The city never truly slept, but in the dead of night, it whispered secrets only I could hear. I stood in the shadows, watching from a distance as Katherine Blake sat alone in a dingy bar, nursing a glass of whiskey with the weight of the world on her shoulders. The cracks in her armor were showing. Her usually sharp gaze was unfocused, her posture slumped. She was unraveling, just as I had planned. Step 4, isolation. Her colleagues had turned their backs. The police department had placed her under investigation. The press had dragged her name through the mud. She was alone now, with nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Just like I had been, I could almost taste the bitterness in her drink, the same bitterness that had once burned my throat when I realized Samantha was gone. My stomach twisted at the thought of her laughter, her touch, the way she had made me believe. even for a second, that I could be something more than a ghost in the dark. But ghosts didn't get happy endings. A flicker of movement caught my eye. The informant I had planted weeks ago slid into the seat beside Katherine, his expression carefully neutral. They exchanged hushed words, and I knew exactly what he was feeding her. False hope. A fabricated lead that would send her spiraling even further, chasing shadows in the dark. Step 5. Desperation. Katherine was a fighter, but desperation made people reckless. Made them vulnerable. She was teetering on the edge of the abyss, and all I had to do was give her a little push. I turned away from the scene, slipping back into the night. There was only one step left. Step 6, the fall. Katherine Blake had taken everything from me. Now, I would take everything from her. The city was a machine, its gears grinding ceaselessly, indifferent to the lives it swallowed whole. Katherine Blake was one of those lives now. Chewed up, spit out, and left to rot. And I was the one turning the crank. She had been suspended pending an internal investigation. The media had turned on her like a pack of starving wolves, each headline another bite into her credibility. Corruption, tampered evidence, wrongful arrests. A dozen cases were under review. Everything she had built was collapsing, and she had no idea that I was the architect of her ruin. But she would. I watched her from across the street as she sat in a dingy bar, her once proud posture slumped, fingers clutching a half-empty glass of whiskey. She looked exhausted, broken, perfect. A figure slid onto the stool beside her. My informant, a nameless man to her, a phantom in my network. He was there to push her just a little further into the abyss. You know, Katherine, he began, swirling his own drink. Rumors are a funny thing. They spread like wildfire. And once someone starts digging, well, sometimes they find things they weren't meant to. Her gaze snapped to him, sharp even through the haze of alcohol. Who the hell are you? Just a guy who likes to watch the mighty fall. Her jaw clenched. She was still fighting. Good. He leaned in, lowering his voice. They say this whole thing started because someone wanted you gone, that someone knew exactly where to hit you. And they hit hard. She went still. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, the first flicker of realization dawning. Not yet, Katherine. Not yet. You're full of shit, she muttered, throwing back the rest of her drink. But there was doubt now, a crack in the armor. My informant chuckled. Maybe. Or maybe you pissed off the wrong ghost. With that, he slid off the stool and disappeared into the night, leaving her alone with her unraveling thoughts. I turned on my heel and walked away, a satisfied smirk tugging at my lips. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was watch her struggle. Katherine Blake was unraveling. I watched from the shadows as she stumbled through the chaos I had orchestrated. Her career was in freefall, her name dragged through the mud by the very system she had sworn to uphold. The city that once respected her now whispered her name with suspicion and scorn. Step by step, I had dismantled her world. But something wasn't right. She was fighting too hard, too desperately. Katherine Blake was a survivor, and she was beginning to suspect that she wasn't just a victim of bad luck. She was starting to see the pattern, the invisible hand pulling the strings. My hand. I had been careful. Every move, every manipulation had been meticulous. But Katherine was a bloodhound. Once she caught the scent, she wouldn't let go. And she was getting too close. Samantha's ghost still haunted me. She had been my light in the darkness, the only warmth I had ever let myself feel. And yet, in the end, I had burned her too. Maybe that was my curse. Maybe I was incapable of anything but destruction. The thoughts settled in my chest like lead, heavy and suffocating. I clenched my fist, shoving the weakness down. There was no room for doubt, no space for hesitation. I had come too far. Katherine Blake had destroyed me once. I wouldn't let her do it again. But for the first time, I wondered, was I truly in control? Or was I just another pawn in this endless game of vengeance and regret? She was closing in. I could feel it. And if I wasn't careful, the hunter would become the hunted. The city felt different tonight. The air was thick with something unspoken, an energy that vibrated beneath the surface like an impending storm. I watched from the rooftop, my gaze fixed on the small bar where Katherine Blake sat, nursing a drink, oblivious to the final act that was about to unfold. She was at her lowest, stripped of her badge, cast out by the very institution she had sworn to serve. The proud detective was now just another lost soul drowning in regret. I had done that. I had taken everything from her, just as she had tried to do to me. But there was one last thing left to take. I moved through the shadows, unseen as I always was, and slipped into the bar. The scent of cheap whiskey and desperation clung to the air. She was hunched over the counter, her fingers wrapped around the glass like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to this world. "Rough night?" I asked, my voice low and steady. She stiffened, her instincts flaring to life despite the haze of alcohol. Slowly, she turned, and when her eyes met mine, I saw it, the flicker of realization. "You," she breathed. I smiled. "Me?" A mix of emotions crossed her face. Anger, disbelief, fear. But beneath it all, there was something else. Something deeper. "You did this," she whispered. "All of it. The investigation, the scandal, the downfall. It was you." I leaned in slightly, letting the truth sink in. "I told you, Katherine, you don't get to destroy someone like me and walk away unscathed. Actions have consequences. And you had this coming." Her jaw tightened, but there was no fight left in her. No badge to hide behind. No department to back her up. She was alone, vulnerable, exactly where I wanted her. I studied her for a long moment, letting her feel the weight of it all. Then I reached into my pocket and placed something on the bar, a single bullet. A final message. A choice. She stared at it, her hands trembling slightly. "Do whatever you want with it," I said, turning to leave. "But know this, your story isn't over, Katherine. It's just beginning." And with that, I vanished into the night, leaving her to the wreckage of her own making. The rain fell in thick sheets, drenching the city in an unforgiving downpour. I stood in the shadows of a decrepit warehouse, watching the storm rage as if the heavens themselves were mourning. Inside, Katherine Blake sat slumped in a chair, her wrists bound, her breath ragged. Her once pristine face was bruised, her confidence shattered. She had fought, of course she always did, but this time she had lost. She lifted her head, eyes burning with defiance. "You think this is over, Jack?" I crouched before her, tilting my head. "No, Katherine, this is just the beginning." Her jaw clenched. "You set me up? The investigation, the disgrace, the whole damn thing. You wanted me ruined." I let out a humorless chuckle. "Oh, come on, detective. Give yourself some credit. I just nudged the pieces into place. You did the rest all on your own." She seethed, her breathing heavy. "And Samantha? Was she just another piece in your game?" Her name was a blade to my ribs. I inhaled sharply, my fingers twitching. "Samantha was never supposed to get hurt. Then why did you let her go?" She pressed, searching my face for the truth. I clenched my jaw, because she deserved better than me. Better than all of this. Silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken words. Katherine studied me, something shifting in her gaze. For the first time, there was no hatred, only understanding. And maybe that was worse. I stood up, pulling the gun from my coat. Her body tensed, but I only smirked, flipping the safety back on. "I could kill you," I murmured. "In this right here. But that would be mercy, wouldn't it?" She swallowed hard. "So, what now?" I leaned in close, my lips brushing her ear. "Now you live with it. You live with the knowledge that I won. That no matter where you go, what you do, I will always be there, watching. And if you ever cross my path again, Katherine, I won't be so kind." With that, I cut her loose, stepping back as she gasped in disbelief. She didn't run. She just stared at me, as if trying to decipher the enigma I had become. I turned, stepping into the night, letting the rain wash over me. Samantha's voice echoed in my mind, a whisper of a past that could never be reclaimed. I was alone again, the shadow in the night, the ghost that would never rest. And Katherine Blake? She would never sleep soundly again.
Jack may be here, maybe right next to you.